It's good.
On the air. I never know when to believe that, but I'm gonna assume that it's true. And this is our 2 minutes of green room warm up. So hi. Let's not say anything too
Hello,
exciting
hello.
to start off.
You
But
never
this is
say
the
anything
moment.
exciting anyway.
We'll save it for the very end. For anybody that does show up in the live stream in the next few minutes, the way that we do the show is we kind of record live to tape. So the real show is what gets posted later, but you can kind of get this ahead of schedule preview of what we're going to talk about. And today I was asking on Twitter to throw out some questions. We won't be reading them as we go. I'll always try not to. I like, because if I start reading, like even right now, Caleb just said hi, and so did Camera Junkie. And I start reading them and I can't speak anymore. So we're not going to go through the questions as we do the show, but Marco will be collecting them and we'll circle back and pick a few of the best of them at the end, and we'll try to answer them in the way that we can. And that's it for the preamble. And then we can start the real show, I think. Hi, Valentina. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
So, really good. We were just both talking about the frantic setup thing of I've been in, all I've wanted for the last year is to have some kind of like permanent setup where I can just start either streaming or recording A-roll or have like one go-to setup that's just ready to go. I've been taking little baby steps towards it, but I still end up scrambling every time
Every
I
time.
try to use it.
Every,
But you
I've
you
been
seem
live
like you're
streaming
pretty set
weekly
up on
for,
your end.
no,
Oh,
absolutely not. I've been live streaming weekly
okay.
for over a year. And today was also a struggle. I think it's because both of us are completely overkill on our cameras. You're on the C70, I'm on the A7S III, and I use my camera for my job, for work. So I literally ran in here today and then set it on the tripod that I have here and then realized, "Oh, snap, I was using my mic, I was using my recorder. Got to go get those, put them in." I was also using the I got a thank God I got another one. I was using a capture card. Got a second capture card so one can live here for forever. But yeah, it's a mad dash every single time.
Yeah, yeah, no, same boat. I mean, the this camera is like the working camera, so I've been threatening to buy a cheap little one that can just live here, like maybe Sony A6500, and it's just my streaming camera because I don't think you can tell the difference. They look great, but
Yeah, well, it all
I
depends on the lens too.
just
So
haven't done it. Oh, for sure. And most people streaming set, like our standards are pretty low. But for a lot of people here, you are only listening to this, so you can't see what we're talking about anyway. But if you want to, head over to youtube.com/Stallman Podcast and you can check it out. But you should also check out Valentina if you don't already know her work. So, Valentina, I know you from your fantastic little film school segments with Aperture. That's where I have seen you the most, but you also run a full-on freelance cinematography and directing career. You're based in LA. You do great work, but that's all I really know
thank
about you because like we don't know each other that much. So I'd love to hear more about how you actually work, like what kind of projects you're working on lately, and what you're into other than what I've seen on YouTube.
yeah, I think it's YouTube is just such a small smidge of what I do. I'm mainly a commercial director. So I direct campaigns for brands and companies all over the world. I've directed a TV show for Discovery. I've directed 2 seasons of a TV show for Flickr and Fujifilm. And I direct campaigns. I've directed for Nike, for Dell, for Fuji, for MTV, like the list goes on and on. So that's my main thing. And then I also am Aperture's resident pro cinematographer. So I do the 4 minute film school tutorials on the Aperture channel, which is I feel like how most people know me, which is fine because I love Aperture and I love doing those tutorials. And I also teach for Adobe as well. I do the Adobe Live. I also do all of their conferences and all that jazz. A lot more because of COVID. I've been doing a lot more educational content. But now that the world is opening up, the phone cannot stop ringing. Like today I booked 3 jobs. So
Awesome. Yeah, things have been getting busier in my world too. Thankfully, getting back sort of onto realish sets again. But no, that's awesome to hear. Like how much you're doing that is kind of invisible to any of us that just watch for tutorial stuff, and we end up kind of in the same boat where it's like, it's it's so much easier to. This is almost like a sad truth about YouTube. Sometimes it's like it's easier to get people to watch like gear videos
Right.
or teaching people them than to watch the final thing. Like
Oh, a
when we
thousand
do
percent.
commercial work, nobody sees it, and if they did, they wouldn't care because they're like, it's just another commercial. I skip commercials all day long. Like, why would you, why would you want to show me a commercial?
Yeah, which
So
is
yeah,
fine.
it's
I
like,
understand it.
yeah.
But people are always like, I just posted, I created a DIY teleprompter for one of my shoots that I did this week. And people were like, you should make a video about how to create a DIY teleprompter. And in my mind, I'm like, the amount of money that somebody hires me for to make a video for them,
Right,
that amount of
yeah.
time to make a YouTube video about how to make a teleprompter, that would be
Mm-hmm.
wasted time for me. Like there would be no upside to that. But of course I don't say that. I'm just like, no, it's okay. I won't make one. It's fine. But it's like, yeah, no, there's no upside to me making a tutorial about how to make a teleprompter. But people
Well,
don't know.
so
People don't see that. People are just like, well, she's out on YouTube, like making cinematography tutorials, so she must want to be a YouTuber, all this stuff, which is totally fine. There's people who want to be YouTubers, but people don't know. People don't know. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, a weird thing with a lot of the YouTubers I bring on is they're excited to drop their regular clients. I think maybe it's
Yes.
because a lot of them start in weddings. Like that's such a common place to start working in terms of video and photo, and it also is a place that everybody seems to. Not everybody, but too many people I think kind of look down on, and they feel like it's where you start and then you leave it. And a lot of people seem to feel like that with commercial work as well. And to me, like for me anyway, commercial is what I love that we do. Like that's one of my favorite things to do, and I don't want to stop doing it, even if YouTube does great. Like which I love YouTube. Like I really enjoy it, but having both is such a relieving balance.
I
So I don't
agree.
know.
And
It's
I was
I'd hate
wondering
to have
how
one, not
you
the other.
deal with your stuff because for Aperture stuff, I mean, I come up with the ideas and concepts and I host it, but then they produce and they edit on the back end. I don't have to do any of that. How do you deal with your stuff?
Well, I'm very lucky to have Marco, who's helping us produce right now. He has come on as an editor this year, so I've had help that is incredibly helpful. So that, yeah, like, so what it's allowed us to do, because the rest of my business I'm running with my wife. So, like this week, for example, at the beginning of the week, Marco and I shot some A-roll clips for the YouTube channel, and he's been editing that while I've been shooting the commercial stuff with my wife. And then we kind of come together at the end, and it gets finished. But when he's not around, it was like one thing at a time. And,
Yes,
we had to delay projects more, put on longer timelines, which probably meant we're able to take on less total work. So yeah, it's been
fully.
great having that help. Yeah. But I think you're also working like a thing that I kind of wanted to talk about today is like the different levels that people work at in terms of cinematography. And I feel
Mm.
like that world is evolving more quickly than conversations about it are able to catch up with. So, for example, a lot of our jobs are like, we're just there's the us doing like direction cinematography, and we have a few assistants and an editor and hair and makeup, and that's like that's our whole crew pretty often. And a lot of the traditional education up until now, which I feel like is changing, especially with channels like what you're doing with Aperture, they used to really target, they're assuming they're like, okay, eventually you're going to be on a big set. Like maybe you're doing small stuff now, but of course you're working towards something bigger. And I feel like it's become much more common for people to run a lifetime worth of business having these smaller sets. Like you can have a full career where you are never working on teams bigger than 10 people.
100%.
And of course, the bigger side is still going to exist. And I think that you work in both of those worlds depending on the project. But I don't know, like,
Yep.
what's the vibe for you of where that's at right now?
I feel like as far as the education goes, the education up till now on YouTube has been very like one man band kind of stuff. And that's how the Aperture channel started as well, teaching one man band stuff because the thinking was we're afraid to push the envelope and teach more advanced techniques or teach techniques for bigger sets because most people aren't on those sets, right? But just like you said, it's aspirational. A lot of the time, the technique that we're teaching with bigger lights, with five assistants, that's a lesson that you can take into your own life. And there are a lot of people, there are a lot of cinematographers who are doing these smaller productions. I mean, think about it. Every company used to go to a marketing agency, right? And then have the marketing agency create their photography and video. Now, more and more companies are creating in house marketing and in house video teams. So not only are cinematographers and editors being swooped up by marketing agencies, but they're literally being swooped up by the companies themselves. So there's a limitless, like it's growing exponentially, I think, the amount of people who require cinematography education, who are trying to do this full time, who are doing this full time. You could be a local cinematographer in like Kansas and make bank making real estate videos. And that could be like your whole life. And you could just be happy doing that. And that is awesome.
For sure. And because we have this democratization of gear, doing those real estate videos in Kansas can be epic and amazing. And you can go as hard as you want into making whatever your genre is look incredible. Like if you just
Yes.
did corporate videos like interviews 10 years ago, there was a very low ceiling on how those could look. You know, like they could not be cinematic. You weren't going to have motion, camera motion. You weren't going to have cinematic lighting. Your lights are going to be small and hot, and there's no shallow depth field, and and there's no dynamic range. Like
Well, you
on
even
and
think
on and on.
about
Like
wedding
you just couldn't make it
videos.
look nice.
When
Yeah.
wedding videos started out, it was all on like camcorders and handy cams, and then people switched to shooting weddings on DSLRs. And now you have people like Jason Magbanua out from Manila who's like flying all over the world, charging like tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring an entire team out to a giant wedding. And then he pioneered the same day edit for weddings, which now all wedding videographers hate him because he did it, so now
Yeah.
everyone has to do it.
Painful.
But look, it's a guy in the Philippines, in Manila, who now makes
Mm-hmm.
these epic wedding films and became famous for them. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, the pep talk from that is like, if you think that you're stuck doing weddings, it's like you're just not. I mean, I hate to say it, but you're not trying hard enough because like weddings can be so much. You can bring yourself to best in the world documentary filmmaking status in terms of like storytelling and visuals,
Yeah.
and you can make anything you want because you basically have free models in front of you. A story is presenting itself, and since it's a bit of a formula, every time you shoot a wedding, you can take very specific notes of like, oh, I should have like hit this timing better. I should have had my mic placement closer here. It would have been worth bringing my own lights for this part of the ceremony. Blah blah blah. Like you really can start to evolve your method for tackling that exact type of storytelling so that if you do it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you can become incredible. And I feel like whatever the itch is you're trying to scratch by doing filmmaking, you're going to be able to find it in all of the different types of work that are readily available, like
This is
weddings and
very true.
commercials. And like,
So true.
you can take it so far now.
I had a job where I was doing makeup videos for a few years. I was doing cinematography on makeup videos, and there's only so far you can make a makeup video, right? There's foundation, eye, lip. Like, come on. But I was doing okay. Let's shoot like a completely separate cinematic intro. Let's make live graphics appear on the screen. Let's get painted backgrounds. Let's do like a crazy 360 shot with effects. Like and that's what I found happiness in. It wasn't necessarily that I love makeup or that I care about new products. Like, sure, we had a list of products we had to show off in each video to make sponsors happy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like that part doesn't matter. It's the format that mattered. It's the innovation on the cinematography end that mattered. And I think you can find that in everything. And you can become better through just practice, practice, practice.
Well, and you're doing that for Michelle Phan, is that right?
Yes, yes.
which is like the best place to be. I mean, that's pretty amazing as a an opportunity to create, to elevate a category, and everybody's going to see it because it's, she's just like one of the biggest channels. So the whole world is going to be, you're not just doing it for nobody. Like, even with a wedding, right? Let's say like in a big wedding, a few hundred people will ever see it, but those videos were seen by, I'm sure everyone was over a million views. And, yeah, I mean, like, all those things have just been able to progress so far, even like tech videos, even podcast videos, like it all can be as cinematic and good as you decide to push it into being.
Yeah. And people always
So
ask me, like, how do you find the clients to make something cinematic, right? Because maybe you're stuck in this hole where you're making weddings for a certain like tier of budget and you want to go up to that next tier. And it's all about like, you got to up your skills first. You got to want to up your skills to a point where you can start charging more. And then those clients that can't pay above a certain grade, they just won't hire you. But guess what? New clients will, and you'll make a higher, you'll up your clients, just like I did with my commercial stuff. Starting out shooting no budget commercials by myself, then started getting a crew. Now I'm getting like bigger budgets. Now I'm shooting campaigns. Now I'm shooting TV shows. Also, there's feedback happening. I don't know if you can hear that.
yeah, it jumped off of my headphones all of a sudden. So cut this part out, Marco. I picked up my phone and then it cut to because I had a Safari window open with this before. So edit point. Sorry.
Wait, do a clap. Ready? Three, two. There we go. That's how I
Claps fix
mark my
everything.
edit points. No, that's how I mark my edit points. So that, then I see the spike in the waveform. I'm like, oh yeah, cut that out.
Oh yeah, that was the mistake. But yeah, so you're talking about the sort of the way that you like step up towards a bigger clients. I'll ask you to elaborate on that, and then you can just kind of jump back into the thought.
Sure.
For you, did you have any sort of like general strategy to move towards clients that you wanted to work with, so that you're getting closer and closer to that goal?
It could be a monetary goal where you're trying to get bigger clients, or it could just be that you're shifting the type of work that you're doing. Maybe you're shifting from wedding to commercial. And my advice is always do the thing that you want to do. Be doing that, right? If you want to increase the cinematic output of your videos, then do that because clients will find you based on things that you've already done. So something that I wanted to do a few years ago, when was this? This was like 2013-ish, is I got turned down for a gig to shoot all the videos for Air New Zealand for like their whole new campaign for Air New Zealand, all the videos for their planes and everything. And I was being pitched by a marketing agency to Air New Zealand, didn't win the pitch, asked why. They were like, you don't have enough travel in your reel. So literally the same day I booked a 2-week trip to Europe. I shot every single day. I created like the sickest travel video and I have like, except for COVID, except for 2020, I have barely set foot in the United States. Like I've been just traveling nonstop. But it's because I took that initiative and because I knew what I wanted. And most people are just who ask for advice, they're just like, I want to shoot this and this, but I don't know. Or I want to write films. And I'm like, that's the thing when people are like, I want to write films. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're friends. I direct and shoot. Do you have a short film? Like, let's make it happen. I have equipment. Let's do it. And people are like, no, I don't have a script. It's like, come on, let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Get with it. No, I was experiencing a smaller normal life version of this recently. My nephew is applying for his first job, so he's teenager, hasn't had like a crappy job yet at a gas station or wherever it is he's going to end up working, and so we were just kind of like coaching him through like how to act in the interview and things to say, and I was realizing like what, job interviews, especially at that kind of lower level, are so much easier than I ever realized when I was young, because like most people just sort of stumble in there and they're like, yeah, like I guess I'd like to work here. Like, I guess I like ice cream. I guess I like gasoline or whatever it is you're trying to sell.
I
And I'm like,
guess I like
man, now that I'm
gasoline.
older, it's like, it's just so easy to just be like, oh no, I love ice cream. Like there's nothing I want to do more that like, this is my passion is to scoop ice cream for people. And I've been a fan of your company for so long and I would just love to be here. And I'm like, it took me so long to realize that like just by telling people that you really want the thing, like I would love to do this with you is
Hmm.
that's like the whole game, whatever it is. And that
That is,
scales up like that. It seems like the most impossible hurdle when you're young, or it did to me anyway. I didn't know how to get a job when I was a teenager. And now that I figured it out, I'm like, man, I wish I could go like replay those moments. I could have, instead of working at Esso, I could have been at the HMV or I don't know, like
I
something
think it
cooler. Like,
translates to social media too. It's like you have to be on social media who you want to be, not necessarily who you are. So when people are asking me to like, hey, can I be your assistant? Okay, like let me check out their social media. I go to their social media, it's just like photos of their dog. I'm like, well, I have no proof that
yeah,
you
100%.
can be my
Totally.
assistant.
Yeah.
But if it's them, even if they're just taking photos with their iPhone, but they're well composed, they have like a little light on them or whatever, I'm like, okay, this person's like trying something. This person is at least
Yeah.
paying attention to the way that they're coming across.
Yeah. No, completely. I mean, well, and Marco, you should have a microphone. Marco's listening to us right now and working on this, but he did exactly that. So kudos to you, Marco. He just like wrote me a cold email when I was a smaller channel
That's
too, and he was
awesome.
just like, I'd love to help you out in some way. And I was like, cool, I don't really have anything for you now. And then he wrote back later. Like that was probably the biggest thing is
Yeah.
he was like, no
Yeah.
worries. And then got back to me. And I had something for him then. I was like, you know what, if you could just help me with this one thing, that'd be really great. And now here we
Yes.
are. It's been like 3 or 4 years later, and now he's working for us almost full time. And like so there are a lot of people not again everybody we don't have room to hire anyone else so I don't want to get a bunch of emails that we're hiring, but I'm just saying if you're looking to do something like that,
Yes.
being first of all being respectful of the person's time that you're reaching out to, and then
Thank you.
following up, just being like, I actually do want to do this, and when there's
Yes.
room, like I'm still interested.
Yeah, didn't realize until I became this person because I used to be the person reaching out, right? Now I'm the person people reach out to, and I didn't realize that I get hundreds of like DMs and messages and tweets and texts and emails every day, and there it's just impossible to read all of them. And so if you reach out again, then okay,
Mm-hmm.
like I see that you are actually actively trying to get my attention, and that's a good thing. And about the respecting time, that's also important. Like, don't write me a whole paragraph lead up to your question. Ask me your question, make it succinct. Or don't just write, hey, how are you? And wait for me to respond before you ask your question. I'm
Oh no,
never
no,
going to respond.
I have the I have the worst one, which is incredibly common. So everybody listening has probably written somebody this, and I have at different points. Don't open with, "Can I ask you a question?" Especially if that's all that
Yes.
you write. Like when I get messages that are just like, "Can I ask you something?" It's like, do I need to respond and say like, "Yeah, that's okay. You can ask me a question." I mean, you just did. You already asked me a
Yes,
question. Now I'm
sir,
answering
I
it.
am just waiting for you to ask me this question. I would
Just
love to be your tech support person. I would
just
love
ask
that.
the question, and if
Just
I have
ask the
time, I'll
question.
answer it. And if I don't have
Exactly.
time, you'll know the answer to whether you can ask me
One
a question
tricky
or not.
thing
So,
about being a cinematography instructor and an editing instructor on socials is that people do treat me like tech support. And
mhm.
like, don't get me wrong, I will answer those questions as many as I can, as often as I can, but you got to ask it. You can't just be like, can I ask you a question? I get that all the
Right.
time. It's so annoying.
What what are common, or what are some good questions you've had asked to you as well? And by the way, anybody watching the live version, you can ask questions in the chat that we will circle back to at the end of this episode. So, but what do people ask you that's you think is like a good thing for them to ask that actually you can help them with?
Some good questions are like my reasoning behind a particular thing. If I see that you've paid attention to something I've said and you're asking for clarification on that, that's a good thing, right? Because I know that you already know what I'm talking about. So if you're like, hey, was just wondering why you pancakes your timelines instead of dragging from the source bin. I'm like, great. Like, let me tell you why. The worst kind of stuff is when people are like, what's your favorite camera? Or like, what camera should I buy? Or what
Hmm.
light should I get? I get what light should I get all the time. People are like, what light should I get?
Yeah.
And I did respond at first because, I like to be nice and I'm like, well, what are you shooting? What kind of things are you planning to shoot? What is your budget? People don't tell you these things when they ask, what light should I get? They just ask, what light should I get? I'm like, what are you shooting? What is your budget? And then I would like recommend them a lighting package. But now it's just so frequent that I just don't have the time to respond to everyone and build lighting packages for them. So I hope
Yeah,
that,
for sure.
they can go to the videos and watch them instead.
Yeah, I mean that's so common as well. It's like the question is something that would be a video. It's like I don't have 6 hours to make a 6 minute video for you to answer this, but
Right.
hopefully I will someday and keep an eye on the channel. But yeah, like because I get questions like that too of like, what should my first lens be or whatever. And of course, then
Yeah.
you got to be like, okay, well, tell me everything about yourself because I don't want to give you the wrong answer. But I also may not have the time to invest. So if you want to reach out to somebody that has the expertise that could I mean, because like, yeah, like specific tech questions, there are things that I could be helpful with. But if you can construct your question in a way that that whoever you're asking it to can answer with just a few words, you're so much
Hmm.
more likely to get a response. And it doesn't matter who the person is like. As long as they read the message, it can be people much more famous. I mean, that's not really what I mean. Much more like anybody that
Busy.
if you can get your message in front of them and it's really easy for them to respond, you can get responses from like anybody, especially on Twitter.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So
I mean, I sometimes people are like, what frame rate were you shooting this clip at? And they like send me the clip and I'm like, easy, 60. And then I just send like 60. And it's so easy for me to respond to that. And like I hope that people know that when I'm responding to these things with like one word or two words, it's not it's not because I don't want to write out, oh, thank you so much for your question. I really appreciate it. For this shot, it's just time.
it's true. So what? Let's talk about as well, like to skip people having to ask questions as well. What is like advice that you find yourself giving regularly? Like when you're just talking to people that are getting started, do you have any sort of like broad, like this is usually good steps to take when you're relatively early on in a filmmaking career. You sort of can't go wrong if you follow X, Y, and Z
Well,
piece of advice.
what are those what are those pieces of advice that you tell people? I'm actually curious.
A lot of the time, I think people they spend a lot more time focused on gear and technique, which is required. And like I care about those things because I think you have to understand your tools and you have to know how to use them to really create great work. But what most people are missing is taste, is just recognizing when your work looks great. Because
Yeah.
there's just so much stuff I see that is like technically there is nothing wrong here. Like you did you checked all the boxes. You're shooting at the right shutter speed relative to your frames per second, and you slapped some NDs on there, and the white balance is right, and you put a nice LUT on or whatever. But like in the end, it doesn't look like work that you want to spend a lot of time watching, and I struggle with this too. I mean, I've done so much stuff that I look back and I'm like, man, it's so obvious that I was just trying to execute on something technical in this moment. And I didn't have any sense of a bigger picture. And a great example of this actually that I've been able to recognize more as I worked with, like, because my wife's background was in fashion. So I ended up doing all this fashion stuff that I don't know anything about, or I didn't know anything about fashion until I started shooting it. And I started realizing that so many photographers think of fashion photography as a photography style. And that's just all of a sudden you have to change your mindset to that.
Right.
Like, no, it's about whatever's on the other side of the lens. It's not about you. It's not about your photography. Like you have to stop being so self-involved. It's about what you're sharing with the world. Like, what are you showing them? Then, like, how can you show it in an interesting way, or in the clearest way, or the, an original way? Like, but having some perspective of like, what are you shooting? Why are you shooting it? I think is something that is harder to develop, and less people become good at. I don't know. That's my
Yeah,
long-winded, quick answer.
I feel like something that I see a lot in people's work and people's reels is just a pretty person in a space, right? Just like
Okay.
a woman walking through a field, a man walking through a house, just looking around. And that's when I think, usually it's beautiful people. And so I kind of think when I see those shots, take the beautiful person out of it, right? Replace the beautiful person with just like a blob, like an amorphous blob. Is it still a good shot? Or is it like a pretty shit shot? And
Mm-hmm.
you just have a beautiful person who's pulling a lot of that for you. A lot of times, also, shooting in log, shooting in cinematic modes with high dynamic range, you can get away with a lot. Images can look great if they're not lit at all. If there's no reason why you're doing a camera move, if there's no reason to the story, it could still look really, really good, and people get away with it. People just buy like a really high dynamic range camera, and they got a really beautiful person in front of the lens, and then they shoot, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, right? So I try to take that away, and I try to look at, okay, what's the purpose of the shot? What's the reason for the shot? What is the pacing of this? What is the lighting doing? um and that's sort of how you build that professionalism. I'll give you an example. The other day, my producer's like, what camera do you want? We can get a C70, we can get a Komodo, you can shoot on your own. And I'm like, okay, but how much production design did we budget for this shot? And he's like, well, none. And I'm like, can you take all of the
Right.
camera rental fee and put it into production design? I'll shoot it on my camera, but I have to have something to shoot. It can't just be a person
Mm-hmm.
in a blank room.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think that's one of
that's
the
what
most
that's what I think.
commonly missed things, especially on like the lower budget commercials, is like there, any sense of like pre-production, art direction, even going further back to like the building a concept that's worth shooting. Those
Yeah.
most fundamental things get skipped the most as the budget gets smaller. And I kind of understand why too, because those are also things that are harder to hire for at a low budget. I mean, a lot of that pre-production stuff, when it's done by an agency, like it's not a lot of agencies that are doing like $2,000 jobs, or like, oh
Right.
yeah, we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll write a script and do all of your storyboards for $1,000. Like, so that's why it gets skipped, but it's so essential. And when you can have a great concept and some great talent in art direction that comes together for something lower budget, that's when you get miracles. Like
I
it
think
makes
it
me think of.
also it
I
also
was gonna
gets
say it makes me
skipped
think of like
because
go ahead. Sorry, you go.
no, no, please finish your thought. We have a little bit of a delay here, which is why it's like hard to talk. Please finish your
Oh,
thought.
for sure. I was gonna say it makes me think of like Dollar Shave Club was a great example of it, where it's like simple concept and the video goes massively viral. And there's so many of those, right? Where it's like good idea for an ad, not hard to execute, and everybody loves it because of the concept.
Yeah, Dollar Shave Club really pioneered that like founder talking into the camera for a long take, walking through a lot of rooms situation. And it's almost like they
Yeah, it
started a
was
new
done so
trend.
many times. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely forgot what I was going to say earlier, so that's fun.
All right. Well, that's all right. We'll just keep talking over each other until it works.
Wait, what did you say right before you mentioned Dollar Shave Club? I feel like I had
That
something
low
important to
budget
add.
commercials cut out
Oh,
the
yes.
agencies.
Yes. I was saying because most of those low budget things are done by one person. And most people who are taking on, those many hat jobs, they're focusing exclusively on camera. That's it.
Right.
And they
Yeah.
don't have that background in production design. They don't even think about the production design because they're like, well, I need this lens rental and I need this and this and that. And they don't really look at the full thing. And also what you were saying, the reason to shoot, that is my first question to a new client or to a new project that I work on with a client. What is your goal? That's the thing I
Right.
ask. And if their goal, I literally have heard someone say to diversify our content slate as the goal. And I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
There has to be
All
a
right. Good
reason why
luck
you're
with
making
that.
a video, right? There has to be a
Yeah.
reason
Right.
why this isn't a newsletter or a photo. It's a
Hmm.
motion thing. It needs to
Yeah.
have a reason for being in motion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, same reason that I'm always pushing, like, no, there's lots of reasons to shoot on phones as well. Sometimes a phone will tell your story better than all the best gear in the world.
A
What,
hundred
what are
percent.
some examples when you feel like the gear matters? Like, what gear is worth, say, investing in if you're purchasing it, or like starting to push your budget into? Like, what makes the real difference in terms of the tech?
Wow. Well, almost no gear matters. I would say something that actually matters. I mean, sound is incredibly important, and that is something that a lot of camera people don't think about. But it's expensive to hire a sound operator on every single shoot. What if you're doing, just a very simple interview, right? Having a lav mic, a wireless lav mic is so important. I also think if you don't have money for lights, because investing in lights it's an investment for a lot of people who can't drop like $1,700. Um, Use the sun to your advantage. Get a nice reflection board, get some sort of bead board or some sort of 5-in-1 reflector or something like that. But to be quite honest, I know so many DPs, like especially if you're interested in cinematography, I know so many DPs who don't own a single thing, who don't own a camera, who don't own a light, who don't own a mic. They're hired for their skills and their knowledge on how to use these things, not necessarily for the gear that they own. And that's awesome, I think. That's really cool because then they can be camera agnostic. They don't have to use their red Komodo on everything. They can use whatever, they can rent whatever they want as long as they're proficient in it or whatever's best for the project. That's how I work a lot because I have my Sony, but for almost every project that I do, I rent the camera based on what the project is and whether I need certain things for the camera to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that our us like solo operator, owner operator types forget is the context of how often on bigger projects like that everything's a rental. It's like you're including your lenses and on
Yep.
being so focused on that can really distract you. And to your point of like using the sun, something I think I've always spent too little time learning is how much of like a perceived budget you can get by understanding scouting and time of day and scheduling. Like literally just being,
Yes.
okay, like here's our shot list. We need to shoot in this direction in the morning. And then when we're going to flip it around noon because, or,
100%.
at noon, it's going to
1000%.
suck. So we're going to shoot our, things that we can maybe flag off. And then we're going to reverse it as the sun goes down. Like I just didn't understand that until I now,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
it took a long
that
time to
is
figure that out. But
so important. I always do a scout. I always bust out my photo pills app. I do the AR. I check the position of the sun. I'm exactly like you said. I'm like, we're gonna shoot this first here, this afternoon. It's also like you have to keep daylight savings time in mind. You have to keep like sunset in mind. You have to also like I prefer scouting everything myself because if the producer scouts and then sends me photos, I'm just like, what? Like, are there beams that I can clamp to on the ceiling? Or do I have to like bring in some sort of rod system? Are there enough power outlets? And are they all on the same line? How many watts can I plug into this thing? Do I need to bring batteries? Do I need to bring generators? It's so important to do a scout. I feel like,
yeah.
yeah, it's just incredibly. And I also always bring my camera, um like my A7S III with me and my zoom lens that's like 28 to 135 so that I can approximate the angles and then I'll take photos on set of the way that it looks like and then I'll actually draw my storyboards on top of those photos on my iPad so people like already kind of see, oh, okay, this is where the person will be, this is what the setting look like. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a practical question in terms of scouting, and then we're going to turn to some of the questions from the chat. But do you charge for scouting, and what if the client wants to cut it? Because this is actually something we've run into sometimes. Like, okay, we have like a scout day rate that we sort of are saying like, yeah, you really should do this because we think we need to scout. And so often the lower budget stuff, like, well, we don't really think you need to scout. So like for you, do you just do it anyway? Do people not mind paying for it? Or do you just insist that it's built into the rate?
I it depends. A lot of times, like I just did a like a second unit on a big commercial, and for that one, I wasn't paid for the scout, but I needed to scout it. Absolutely critical scout for me. So that was really important. Most of the time I just throw it in because it's if it's in LA, I just, I consider that just lost time, which is totally fine because it's part of my job. It's part of what I do. It's part of who I am. It's part of why people hire me as opposed to the next person. So yeah, I don't really charge for scouts. I would love to, but it's not where I
Right.
am. That's
Just
not
throw
my
it in.
life.
Well, those are my questions, but I think we hopefully had some questions come in because we're also doing this live, which we don't always do. But Marco, what did we get coming up from the chat? So yeah, turning to chat questions, Eamon asks, could I become a good videographer without studying filmmaking at school since it's really difficult to get the right instructions for free? Did you go to film school?
I did not.
Did not. Me neither. So there's a very quick answer to it. So yeah, I mean, like I learned through doing it, and I think a lot of people now do as well. So I don't know. To me, film school is like if you have a hard time teaching yourself stuff without structure around it. It can be hard to
Right.
it can be hard to work from home. It can be hard to focus. It can be hard to make friends. Film school can introduce you to like-minded people, give you some frameworks to learn this stuff. But the people that become good at it are the people that are going to get obsessed with it anyway. So
But also in that question, they asked what are the right instructions? There's no such thing. There's no such thing as right instructions. If I were to go to film school and listen to those people, I would not be where I am because it's like, oh, you can either be a cinematographer or an editor or a director. You can't be everything. And I'm like, well, screw that. Like, I can be everything if I want to. And I will be,
yeah,
and I am.
yeah. Don't tell me what I can and can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I also think you're going to end up getting completely different advice from whoever you talk to, and sometimes there's like opposing advice from really skilled people that both of those different pieces of advice are true. It's like people will give you
Yes.
contradicting career advice, and they both can work. It just like it
Yeah.
depends on your path and on your technique, and
Yeah, also take what we're saying with a grain of salt because neither of us went to film school, whereas the person who did go to film school will probably tell you about all the great things that they learned in film school. So,
exactly, yeah, totally. All right, Marco, what else you got? All right. What film shows have you liked in the past recently from Zuma? What are you into lately, Valentina?
oh gosh, the only show I watch right now is RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah, my wife
I've
too.
been,
I don't see it on screen that much, but I hear hours of it. So like all of the catchphrases are
yeah,
constantly stuck in my head.
well, because there are hours of it. Like I think there's like 5 hours of RuPaul's Drag Race every week that's happening. I just don't have time right now to watch anything. Like I don't even have time to watch YouTube videos at this point. But my favorite movie is Call Me by Your Name by Luca Guadagnino. And
Still haven't seen it.
yo, what's yeah, I don't maybe we should just end this interview because I don't really have anything to talk to you about anymore. Is what I'm
And
saying.
circle back
Um,
after. Oh,
no, it's just a beautiful film. It's not one of those that's like fast paced and has like a ton of plot. It's definitely like a slow simmer. But they shot that entire movie on one camera and one lens. Can you guess which focal length that lens was?
40 millimeters on a full frame.
It was a 35.
Oh, I was guessing that because of 1917, because that was 40 on an LF. So that was
On
my
the
that was
whole,
my like
okay.
basis. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No,
So,
it
but
was a 35, which is literally, I know you're not supposed to have like a favorite focal length, but I love the 35. That was like my first lens. I got really used to it, just walking back and forth for close-ups, for wides, and I still to this day I'm like always gravitating towards it. I know you're not supposed to have one, whatever, but again, like fuck the rules, right? Who cares?
totally. Yeah, I mean, filmmakers much better than me are completely breaking all of these rules. Like, most of the most interesting filmmakers are like breaking one rule in a really interesting way. So, and yeah, I've been trying to catch up. I realized at the end of 2020 that I watched almost no movies because
Yeah.
I see most of my movies in the theater. Like that is
Yes.
I just love theaters. Like cinema,
Yes.
that's the thing for me. And I think part of it connects to that I focus on movies at home much worse. The fact that you're forced to sit down, like this movie's going to keep playing whether you go to the bathroom and check your phone or not. So you might want to keep sitting in your seat. But meanwhile, at home, it's like I was watching a few things lately that it took me like 3 nights to watch it in chunks because my email was going off or whatever. So I've been trying to watch more at home. And this month it's been going through all of the Paul Thomas Anderson movies I hadn't seen before, starting with Boogie
Okay.
Nights, which I had never seen and is essential viewing, I was told, and now I see why. And something that drove me crazy after watching it was finding out that he was 27 years old when he directed it. And it does not look like it was made by somebody in their 20s. So yeah, I've
I
just
actually
been trying
haven't
to
seen it. I
catch
need to
up.
see it.
Yeah, put it on there. I mean, now, I get why everybody's telling me to see it. Just in terms of filmmaking, like, there's nothing really specific. Like, there's no specific moment. It's like, oh yeah, like it's gonna blow your mind. Just like watch the subtleties and just like the small moments and the ways that things can be weird and that like that strangeness and unnaturalness can just like feel so right for the universe that's being built for you. So yeah, Boogie Nights, The Master is the last one that I watched. What's the next one? I got to watch Inherent Vice next. So, but I don't have
I
time for
just rewatched
shows.
I just rewatched Cabaret, which I didn't remember how weirdly that was edited. That they'll just like splice like a person's eye for like 2 seconds in the middle of a scene, and you're
Right.
like, I don't. What is this? What is this? Why is this happening? Okay, all
Do you
right.
have like a
Art.
thing that you're like watching for the most when you're watching? Like, are you watching the cinematography the most, or are you watching like thinking about directing or editing, or like?
I tend to watch for cinematography the most. Actually, I do movie nights. I had my second movie night on Twitter Spaces. The first one was on Clubhouse, and we watched Kung Fu Hustle, and that was really really fun. Because me and just like five people just nerded out about cinematography. I watched it on Netflix party, so I had the pause controls. So I would like pause, rewind 10 seconds, be like, okay, so watch the shadow of this cat and how it gets cut in half, and that's how you know that the cat's been murdered. And yeah, it was really I can't watch movies anymore, to be honest, without completely ruining it. I don't remember the last movie
Yeah.
that I was really, really like into the story and paid attention to and got lost in.
Does it actually
But
ruin it? Like, does it feel frustrating, or
it
is
does.
it
No,
because
it's
like
super
there can be a
frustrating.
fun to it as well? Okay, yeah.
It's super no, like it's super frustrating because I want to go back to ignorant me sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't see all of the tricks, who doesn't realize that, oh, in the close up they added a hair light. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just inherent now at this point, and it's just like I can't enjoy a single movie. I can't delve into a single story. That's why RuPaul's Drag Race is so great, because it's a reality show. I mean, not that real, but you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's not anything specific to cinematography, and I can sort of turn my brain off and enjoy it. But during the pandemic, I've also realized that I've watched very, very few movies, because when you work from home, and I mean, I've worked from home for what, over a decade now, you just always have something to do. You always have work to do. I work 24/7, 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're watching a movie, you just feel guilty because you have an edit due, or you have to do pre-pro on a project, or this client is waiting for you to email them, or this client is waiting for your invoice, and this client is waiting for, and I have like anywhere between 8 and 20 clients at any one time. So it just feels really bad and guilty to sit down and watch something, unless this is the way that it was in the past, unless it's with a friend, which is why I
Right.
loved going to movies, because I'll just call a friend, we'll go to the movie theater. I don't feel guilty because now it's friend time, and I'm like, giving
Yeah.
my time to someone else.
Yeah. No, I got to start making that time for myself to do it. Um, but yeah, what else do we hit? Marco, I saw something pop up and I missed it. Next up, James asks, "What's the best way to pitch video concepts to clients?" So there's something interesting about that question that assumes that you're pitching it to the client,
Yes, I was
which
just about to say.
isn't. Yeah. Well, what does that make you think? What's your response to that?
Well, I was just gonna ask you if you pitch to clients because I don't. Clients come to me. I don't remember the last time I pitched something.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think of pitching as like something you do early in your career. So it's like it's not at all a bad thing. Like pitching can be how you get certain types of jobs that are unavailable to you when you don't have a body of work to get in the door. But the goal is definitely to get to a point where like you're just not really worrying about it anymore. And yeah, typically clients are coming to us, and then we're trying to find a solution for whatever the problem
Yes,
is.
exactly.
But like so what will happen sometimes is a client will come with they know they want to. It's kind of like what you were saying of like they just know that they need a video and they don't really know what the video is. That still happens with us sometimes, and it's like they're kind of looking for a concept as well. So sometimes it's like the client will approach us first, but then we'll pitch back like, okay, well here's a
Right.
concept that we could execute really well in the budget range that you've specified. So
Yeah, I had the same thing. That's how it happens where a client's like, this is what we want, and then you sort of mold the creative around it. I just did a campaign for a new beauty brand, and they weren't like too sure what they wanted. They just knew that they wanted a website video, they wanted a launch video, they wanted some concept stuff, and I'm like, okay, let's narrow it down because usually clients they ask for the moon and they want this and this and this and that, and then they give you the budget and you're like, I mean, let's see what we can accomplish. And I never say that we can't do something. I let the budget do the talking for me. So I'll make a
right.
budget based on their ideal, and then I'll always make a plan B budget and a plan C budget. And I'll be like, listen, we can't get 1,000 people and 20 school buses, but we can get 100 people and two school buses and use a motorized arm to duplicate the camera movement and then scooch those 100 people back and then build like build 1,000 people. But the motorized arm is going to cost this much. It'd still be cheaper than paying 1,000 salaries, but it's still going to be really expensive because it comes with an operator. Or plan C is like, let's get them dirty in the foreground and not have the school buses, and then usually the client's like, oh, we don't have budget for any of that. So let's just go with plan C. Or
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be like, you know what? This, like, if it's like a multi-day shoot or like a multi-week shoot or something similar, I'll be like, let's just film a backup. Be like, let's film a backup. And then I throw the backup in the edit and then I show it to the client and the client's like, oh, this works. I'm like, great.
Yeah. And I think it's really
Perfect.
common too that the clients will come to you with no concept of what will consume the budget, right? Like what
Oh
will be so
no.
difficult here? Really common example is like a great way to save money and time is like, how many locations do you have here in your script? Okay, well, let's cut all but two or all but one. And all of a sudden it gets a whole lot cheaper because like transportation and multiple setups is like, it just kills your time.
Or
And,
sometimes clients will be like, let's shoot outside because then we
yeah,
don't need to have a studio. And I'm like, actually, shooting outside is more expensive because you need permits from Film LA. You need to you still need lights, trust, because you're putting diffusion over the actual sun. You're bringing a fake sun in, but now you need generators. Like it's actually a lot more expensive to shoot outside than you think it is. So how about we tweak that concept real
yeah,
quick?
yeah, for sure. The like, yeah, a lot of the time we're doing that this week actually, where they wanted to do sunlight. It was like we just want like natural, beautiful, harsh sunlight, and we are like, well, we're gonna try to see if that can happen, but the odds of there being a cloudy day are very high. So we're going to do it outside of a studio, and we'll probably end up in the studio when we have this cloudy day because it's spring right
The
now
cloudy
and
day
half the days are
or
cloudy.
like some clouds right? Where they're passing overhead and then you're just waiting for that
Oh yeah,
cloud to
yeah.
pass. Okay, everybody, we have 5 minutes. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's what
Uh,
makes it more expensive is now like you didn't finish in the day or you couldn't shoot any of it. Like the last time we're shooting outside, it rained. It's like now you are on a second day. That's a lot more expensive than being able to control it, and so much of that
yeah.
can just go back to what the concept is in the first place. So yeah, so another question for like how you work. Are you who's usually hiring you? On most of your projects? Like, is it producers directly? Are you working with agencies? Like, how do you end up finding most of your work right now?
All of the above. All of the above.
Sure.
So yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, I just got I just got commercial representation as a director. So a lot
Nice.
of my future work is going to be coming through that agency, but um it's all over the place. Honestly, I base it on like what I want to do, what's fun for me to do, what's something that's going to be enriching for me, whether it's meeting a new person um who's going to teach me something new, meeting someone who I've wanted to meet, going to a new place. And then I sort of like base my content calendar on that. I have some recurring clients like Aperture, like Adobe on a weekly or monthly basis, which are like short things, which is really good to have if you're freelance, to have just like recurring clients. I have a little bit of
Yeah.
um, income coming from my Moment course on how to shoot professional interviews, just like a tiny bit of income, not that much. But yeah, it's really hard. I don't think people realize how hard it is to be, a production company owner, because I hire employees too. Like I hire people, I hire producers, I hire wardrobe artists, makeup artists, I hire dancers, choreographers. Like I have to pay all of them. I have to run billing. I have to do all this stuff. People don't realize like that 80% of my time is spent like running my own business.
Yeah. No, I mean that's like the classic freelancer story is you think that you're going to have all this free time. You think that being your own boss is, yeah, I mean, a lot more of it is like suddenly you're a manager rather than a
100%.
spending your time doing what
And
you love to do.
and a lot of it is not necessarily securing the job, because I get so many people reach out to me and everybody wants to work with me. It's saying no to jobs because you've already said yes to something else, and you can only stretch yourself so far, stretch yourself so
Yeah.
thin. So
Totally. All right. David is also asking any tips on staying on task and organized when you're overloaded with different types of jobs. Oh man,
I,
you asked
I'd
the
love
wrong
for you to
person,
give me a
which is
tip.
me. Oh man, yeah. Like, I'm the. I've done a few videos lately on how disorganized I am. Like specifically on how is it that I even have a career when I'm as bad at staying organized as possible. And like the
If
the
you could see
unhelpful
what's
part
in
of
front
my
of me on my
answer
desk
is
right now.
yeah, the unhelpful part of my answer is well, for one, I don't end up being that organized, and then I have a business partner that is more organized than me. Helps a lot, like which is not a that's not a helpful answer because like you can't just assume that you're gonna be able to go out there and have somebody kind of keep track of things if you're not that great at it. But it's a bit of the truth for me is it's really part of how I able to do that. But it can mean like offloading some of the things that you know require a lot of staying on the ball. So you know that may mean I don't, I don't know. Like it may mean like if you're a one man show that like maybe the editing is really bogging you down. So maybe you're deciding like, okay, I can't
Right.
handle all of that myself. So I'm gonna get somebody to at least do like to prep the footage for me or do like the really the messy part of it, or I'm gonna have assistants come in when I need to move my own gear. And this is I'm talking all in terms of sort of single operator kind of things. Like find places where you can focus a bit more because your time hasn't disappeared by these things that can just totally consume you, and it's not necessarily you're not the only person that could do it. You know, somebody else can help you with
Yes.
some of those things. So try to find those.
Unless you are the only person you can do it, and then you're overloaded with things that only you can do. Like a lot of times when I direct stuff that will eventually not see the light of day beyond social media, I'll offload that to other editors because I don't need to be editing cut downs. That does not like that my time is too valuable. So
Right.
I'll offload that to other editors. But then I'll fill that time with things that are not, are my level, and then I'll just be overloaded on that. I stay on the ball with GCal, with asking my clients how high priority is this, by letting people know when I'm going to be done with things. I I try to ask for deadlines as much as possible, and like stepped deadlines. So I'm like, okay, when do you need draft one by? Okay, when are you going to do that revision? And I also try to be extremely communicative and annoying, honestly. Like
Right.
I'm always
Yeah.
texting everyone and I'm like, hey, just to let you know, like I started working on this an hour ago, but it's gonna be like another 3 hours before I can send it to you, and just like on the ball. But as far as like as a person, I'm highly disorganized. I have a giant bow in front of me on my table next to a card reader, next to a hard drive from 2001, next to a Theta cam that I've never used before, next to a Moment lens 58 millimeter, but the Moment case is nowhere to be found, next to a hairbrush and sunglasses case. Like, I don't, why is this all here? No
I'd sh-
one knows.
I'd show you what's on my table, except it's all cables, and I'm afraid if I moved any of them, this whole stream would fall apart. So,
Right. Let's
yeah,
not.
no, I totally know the feeling. It's just like, and it's a comment I've had before is that it's like, oh no, it looks like you're pretty organized, and it's like, well, yeah, because that's I clean up behind the camera, like that's the easy part.
Right.
That's what bokeh's for. But yeah,
Right.
no, it's actually a disaster back there. So
I think what's important is that we're all disasters, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, because on social media everything looks so flawless and fabulous. It's like, no, I'm actually like before, like when we got on this call right before we went live, Tyler watched me put my makeup on. Like,
and my microphone fell off of the. I realized I need to buy a whole new mic stand right as we were starting. Yeah, disasters
yeah, it's
happening
held
all
up
around us.
by paper clips and a dream.
Spit and hope. I have okay. I have one more question that directly relates to what we both do. Do you ever find it challenging to which part of what we're doing here is like teaching techniques, through YouTube, teaching about technology, about gear, about methods of filmmaking. Do you ever find it hard to balance between having like staying up to date with things enough to like have something really relevant to tell people and just working on your filmmaking? Because it's something I've been thinking about lately is like I don't want to be like so circular in the videos that I produce that it's just like I'm making a video using a technique and I'm teaching you about the thing that I'm doing in this video. And then I do that again in the next video. Like,
Mm.
just trying to find this, like, there's actual storytelling growth happening, not just this, like, I'm making YouTube's videos about the YouTube videos that I'm making. I don't, do you ever end up in that? You're doing slightly different stuff, but
Yeah, I mean, I go from I start off with, at least for cinematography tutorials, I start off with what's something that I want to shoot. What's like a cool concept that I actually want to shoot, and then I go from there. So I think of it less in terms of what am I teaching, and more in terms of what's entertaining for people to watch. Because I learned from all of the makeup videos that I did in the past is that they were technically all the same. It was the same eyeliner technique. You can only have so many techniques for putting on eyeliner and lipstick and blush. It was essentially the same video over and over and over again, but they were
mm-hmm.
ed- they were entertaining. Like, you just want to watch your favorite person who teaches that
Yeah, for
thing
sure.
teach that thing again. So it's just in a different package. So that's kind of what I think of. And also, people just don't care. Like, I don't have anybody who's watching all my videos back to back to back. So they may show up to one video and see a tip about C stands that I've shared in like three other videos, but it's their first time seeing that tip and it changes their
Right.
life,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
for me, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter as
Every
much for
day
the
there's somebody
editing
born that
tutorial.
hasn't seen the Flintstones.
Exactly. And for the editing tutorials, I'm like, I just assume that every single person who watches any of my editing tutorials, this is the first editing tutorial they've ever seen. So I
Yeah.
I try to go as basic as possible.
Yeah, no, it's totally a safe bet. And I probably shouldn't get so inside my head about exactly what's coming out in each of them. Cause like for me, the goal is so often to like fill the gap of knowledge that I wish was filled earlier
Mhm.
for me. Like things that like, why did it take me so long to figure this out? Well, hopefully I can get it to somebody else sooner than it got to me.
I also think that
And
you shouldn't compare yourself to other people who are doing this on YouTube because uh again, like the makeup thing, there's so many beauty influencers, beauty YouTubers, and people might like the way that you explain it more than the next person, or they might
mhm,
like the way that your personality, the way that you do it more than somebody else. So I feel like a lot of people who are making videos on YouTube, they're like, well, someone's already made that video. I won't make that video. It's like, no, make that video. I'll be interested in the way that you talk about it. I don't care about so and so.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, same goes for like I've been watching and listening to more movie podcasts, watching movie like video essays, stuff like
Oh,
that.
very
And yeah,
this.
it's so much like I'll watch 15 about the same movie and I just want the one from Movies with Mikey or like I want them from the people that I'm into. I want their specific take on it and I'll watch everything that they that the internet will give me as long as it's something that I'm interested in. So yeah. I think
Yeah.
you're right. I'm just trying to find peace with how I approach it. But I think you've been right about a lot of stuff, Valentina. So
I
again,
hope you
thanks
find
for
peace.
coming on. I super appreciate chatting. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter, Valentina V, Instagram, Valentina.V, TikTok, Valentina_V. Randomly, my biggest social media is TikTok.
Oh, well done. Are you like serious? Like, do you try to TikTok or does it just come
No, I
natural? Like
don't
you just
try to
post occasionally and it
TikTok.
blows up? Yeah.
I haven't posted a TikTok in 2 months, and prior to that, it was a month, and prior to that, it was a month. So
What's your
I do not
favorite
try to
social
TikTok.
network? Like, what do you enjoy spending time on?
Twitter. Twitter's
Yeah,
my
same.
favorite social network. I
Yeah.
It's just so dumb. It's
The
great.
thing that is the thing that the reason I think most of my friends in real life don't get Twitter is like Twitter shifts once you have a community. Like when there are
Yes.
people responding and there's conversation happening, it becomes wonderful. Like it's great. But I think the early experience when you don't know about Twitter, you haven't really used it, is very quiet. You know, when you comment, nobody responds, and like you don't know who to follow, and you don't know how to Twitter. So it's like a slow burn, and then it's yeah, same here. It's what I enjoy spending time on the most now that I've
Yeah.
been on there forever. So
You can have full conversations in the replies. It's not like Instagram where it's like whatever. And you're right. It's the community aspect of it. It's the fact that I can tweet a meme about like Lutz and then have like a full conversation about it with random
mhm.
people who I've never seen before or met before or even heard of before. And then we connect and then we become friends. And I've made so many friends through Twitter that it's insane. Like I feel like they're my real life friends until I meet them and then they stab me and then I die. But yet to see.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody come find her on Twitter and don't stab her, and we'll have a good time. but yeah, thanks again, Valentina. I'll see you on Twitter.
I'll see you on Twitter.